Welcome back in again to the Believe podcast with your host Dave. I am diving into episode 9 already. Still taking a break from the Ten Commandment breakdown, and in the last episode we were talking about a crazy one. That was a good one. So if you haven't listened to that one, head on over and check that one out. But that was all about when times get tough. And when that snowball effect kind of happens and things go from bad to worse, it's kind of a really awesome and like awesome in such a way that everybody can kind of relate to it kind of episode. So check that one out. This one this week is all about what I'm entitling fine lines, or kind of like this walking the tightrope. And I'm going to dive into that in a hot second. But as always, I'd like to remind you at the top and bottom of each episode here, head on over to the comments section on Spotify and or YouTube, and let me know your thoughts on any of these topics that we are talking about on this faith-based and religion podcast. What I like to do here, if you're new to the channel, is with all these episodes, I like to take real-world anecdotes or topics and kind of rope them back in and see how they are intertwined and interwoven into our faith, and kind of give you my viewpoints, my own personal anecdotes on what I think about all of those. So I can't really preface this one tonight to try and ask you for comments at the top of this episode without getting into it. So let me just get into it right away. This one really has been top of mind as well lately for me, and I just can't. I couldn't shake it, so I'm like, I have to make this into an episode because it's another one that is really interesting for me. So let me just talk about it, and I don't really know how to frame this one. So the title is Fine Lines, but for me, in thinking about it, I think about it more so from the perspective of how to not think that you're better than somebody else. So apologies for the double negative there, but this idea of like not thinking that you're better than anybody else, or thinking that you're on the same equal playing field as everybody else around you. And how that is really tough for everybody to deal with and to grapple with. That's a topic that I think is super tough. You're talking about, again, here in America, we're in a very heated political time. I don't like to get into politics. I never will. I'm on the side of humanity here, but at the same time, we seem to be a country divided like never before, with some of the crazy stuff that's going around, and it just kind of becomes top of mind when you're seeing a lot of different news stories of different things that are going on. And, I'm human just like everybody else is. So, at times I have, these crazy thoughts in my mind too, especially if I'm leaning more towards negative emotions and everything, where, it's easy, I think, for us at times to feel like we're above other people, or that we're better than somebody else in certain aspects of life, no matter what it is, whatever topic or whatever, activity or whatever you're doing at the time. It's very easy for you to just, think yourself better or higher than somebody else, or that somebody else is at a lower station in life. And that's wrong. I think that's sin. That's not what we should be thinking of. And there's a lot of problems that happen when we go down that avenue or that way of thinking. And again, this is not meant to be a political episode. So that's not what I'm talking about here. But it's just kind of interesting how topical it is, and how, different topics kind of come into play here and there. But anyway, I'll get to the other point that I'm trying to make here, is that, trying to go back to square one here and thinking like, why is this still a thing? Why is, racism and prejudice and all of these other things still a thing, nowadays. We have holy wars going on in the Middle East for how many thousands of years, and people killing each other in the name of God, in the name of religion, which is just insane to me. If you try to think about that logically, it makes zero sense. It is one of the dumbest things ever. Here's your pop culture reference for the episode here. My favorite band of all time is a prog metal band called Dream Theater. If you haven't heard of them, head on over and check them out. They've been around for 40 years or so now. They just got off their 40th year anniversary tour, so they've been around for a hot second if you haven't heard of them. And a really great song from them is In the Name of God, I believe is the name of the song. It's off of their Stream of Consciousness album, which I think is like circa 2003, I think, somewhere around there. I should know this because it's my favorite album from them, but that song in particular is exactly what we're talking about today, or what I just talked about in that previous example, which is this whole idea of killing in the name of God, or like using religion to power, your own whatever it is, your own stance, your own political stance, or your own agenda, this power grab, or whatever, like using God. And this is one of the Ten Commandments that I just talked about too, of like using God to get your own viewpoints to a certain spot, or to where you want it to be. That is so wrong. That is definitely breaking a commandment right there of not disguising, but like using religion or something that people respect quite a lot in order to get your own agenda done. That's very selfish, and that's very wrong, in my own personal opinion. But anyway, In the Name of God, Dream Theater, check it out. Really great prog metal song. Anyway, let's wrap it back into the episode here. So talking about fine lines here, too, there's a lot of different arenas that I can get into here as well. There's a lot of different aspects of life where I try to look at it and go like, man, that's a fine line, meaning, at what point as you're walking this tightrope can it go in one direction or the other? At what point, if you're walking down a path, is it right when you're walking down that path, and then, very quickly at the snap of a finger, right? Like it can turn ugly, or it can turn in a different direction. So I think about that a lot with a lot of different aspects of life, and I'll describe that in a little bit more detail in a hot second here. But let's get into it right now. In regards to not thinking that you're better than somebody else, it's definitely a fine line, because of, in taking it back all the way, like I had mentioned before, like trying to take a step all the way back of like, how does this all start in human beings? I think we're actually trained from a very early age in this, art of competition. We're taught very early on in life, if your parents ever got you into sports or into any other activities, that, you had to win, right? You had to be number one, or, what does it take to be a part of a winning team, or even if it's a solo event, like what does it take to win and best other people? So in this state of competition, it's kind of bred in a lot of us at an early age. A lot of us aren't necessarily taught that like, well, it's okay, just try kind of thing. I think a lot of parents tend to be on the side of, wanting you as children to develop and be the best that you can, and to provide you with all these opportunities. And what kind of goes hand in hand with that is this idea of being the best, of trying to beat the competition, advance a few years here. And it could be, getting that job over somebody else. Very competitive job market that we're in now. Like, how do I market myself? How do I stand out? How do I land that dream job that I want to get? Well, you have to beat out a lot of people to do that in order to get picked, right? It's not just, hey, let me show up and slap my resume and that's going to be good enough. Like, no, you got to go through usually an extensive job interview process and prove yourself. Maybe have a portfolio built up, right? All of these things kind of rope into, well, in order to hit these marks in life, I have to be the best, or I have to, achieve. And it all ropes into like how you're viewing yourself against other people. And it's very interesting. So, when you grow up and you have that mentality and you have this idea in mind that, I have to be the best, I have to achieve, I have to like do certain things to get to where I need to be, you can very easily see now, right, that it kind of breeds this idea where you start getting this mentality of like, well, if I'm better than this other person, right? Like I have to be better than this other person. I have to have these skills, or I have to have, this level of training in a sport or whatever in order to be better than the other person or the other team or whatever. And to me, it's always a balance against being humble and humility. And I'm probably, I'm going to touch base on humility a little bit in this episode. I should probably save that for another episode, and I probably will. That's way too many probablys, but I definitely will. But humility is definitely going to get touched on this episode, because by learning the art of humility, you will figure out that and really teach yourself to be on the same level as everyone else. So I think as you age, you start to try and peel back and start to be more inclusive and try to see other viewpoints from other people. And especially here, if we're talking about our faith and everything, that's what it's all about, is inclusivity, seeing other viewpoints, getting other people together. I still believe in that side of America and this melting pot of bringing people together, bringing other viewpoints together. I think we're never stronger as a human race than when we're doing that, when we're getting all of these viewpoints from everywhere else in the world. So I still believe in that side of America, that bringing all of these cultures together in one spot is what we need to be doing. So wrapping it back around to this idea of being humble and this idea of equality, what that teaches us is that somebody like a Jeff Bezos or a Bill Gates is exactly the same as the homeless person on the corner begging for money and food. Think about that. I tried to like paint a very stark contrast for y'all to see on that one. And you can tell that I'm not Southern because my y'all was probably really bad. But this idea that the highest of the highs, or you're looking at certain people, which, is never the case. Like, we paint these billionaires as like, oh my God, they got everything. And like, everybody's got problems, right? Nobody is immune to issues just because they have a bunch of money or fame or whatever. But I try to paint that stark contrast for you guys. Somebody like a billionaire versus somebody who's a beggar on the streets. And I always try to like think back to Jesus as well. And what did he do? He basically went to the poor, right? He gave away, he didn't really have that many possessions, but he gave everything up and lived the life of a poor person and communed with the poor and the beggars and the people who had diseases and things of that nature. He wasn't kicking it with the Bezos crowd. And I like to think of, I'm Franciscan, so I like to think of St. Francis as well. He actually did come from money and ended up giving everything away so that he could live like the poor. So that should really teach you or tell you everything that you kind of need to know. If you're thinking about what Jesus did in this position, he wasn't ever opulent. He wasn't rich. He didn't have the finer things in life, and decided to put himself on that level. And this is probably to teach humanity, right? Not necessarily a lesson, but to teach us something about this idea of humility and this idea that we're not better than anybody else. And again, I'm human, so I struggle with this at times too. And let me know in the comments if you have as well. It's very difficult at times. It's very difficult to look at somebody who's struggling, or somebody who's trying to give you a bad time because they're either drunk or whatever, and go like, if you're somebody who doesn't have a problem with that stuff, going like, you're an idiot, or you're a fool, or you're X, Y, and Z because you have this weakness, and I'm better than you because of that, because I'm not trapped in that weakness. And that's wrong, because you could be completely weak in another area that they're not. So thinking yourself above somebody else because you either have self-discipline or control or better grip on your finances or whatever. I mean, it could span a lot of different arenas or different areas, but thinking yourself better than somebody else because they may have a weakness and you don't, or because they may have made a mistake or a slew or a series of mistakes in their lives and their road is tougher because of it and you didn't, and you're thinking to yourself, well, just keep your nose clean, or get a job or something like that. And when you hear people talking down to somebody else because of those weaknesses, or because they're not on the same path as you, it's really hard to try and deal with a situation like that. And like I said, it's a weakness that's in all of us, I believe. I think everybody has that thought now and again of like, well, this is easy. Like, how do you make that mistake? How is that an issue for you? It's so simple. Like, just, don't make that mistake, or, like but again, it kind of comes back around where, what could be super simple to you could be very difficult to somebody else. And by being humble and trying to put yourself in that person's shoes, or trying to understand where they're coming from, or what their background was, or how they got into that spot, it really helps you to try and understand and be on their level. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to teach us all about. So what else can I put in here? I'm trying to look through my show notes here if there are any other main points. That was pretty good. I have to pat myself on the back just a little bit on that one. I think that was okay. That wasn't too bad there. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to stay in that mentality all of the time. Again, we're human, we're prone to weakness, we're prone to sinning and all this other kind of stuff. So nobody's perfect all the time. I'm not going to sit here and claim that I am, because I'm definitely not. We all make our mistakes. So, and we're all humans, so we're all prone to error. So even the best of us here in this life and in this thing that we like to call, our humanity and our human lives, nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to be able to do things right all the time. But if you try to live your life by faith, try to humble yourself, and try to put yourself in other people's shoes, then I think the world would be a better place because of it. I think there wouldn't be as much hatred and as much, just anger, like unnecessary anger, and really biased and weird viewpoints towards other people because of the color of their skin, or because of their religious affiliation, their faith, their creed, or anything else, right? I was trying to think of another example too, where, this idea of like, let's look into more of like a romantic situation where, even though you may look at another race or another type of person from another part of the world and go like, I'm not particularly attracted to that person, so I would never date that person, even if you're just talking about it from a physical or a look standpoint alone. That doesn't mean that you should take it a step farther and go like, well, those people are, oh man, like have some other kind of viewpoint because of it. And I've seen this, with friends. I've seen this with close friends, with close family, this idea and this tendency to make a blanket accusation or a statement, and this is stereotyping to the highest degree, about a particular race based off of one or a couple of instances that you may have encountered with individuals. That is the fundamental basis underlying all of the bad stuff that we shouldn't be practicing, right? And this idea that like, well, this entire race is dirty because they're stereotypically poor, or they're living in a third world country and all this other kind of stuff. It's like, how do you blanketly, and it's not even a word, but how do you just throw this entire like blanket accusation on an entire group of people based off of this one stereotype? It's so wrong, right? You have to treat each person as an individual and on an individual basis. You can't look at an entire race of people and where they're from in the world, and kind of roping it back around to this whole romantic thing, like looking at them going like, well, I'm not attracted to them, I would never date them, and this whole like and thing, this and statement of like, and it's because oh man, they look a certain way, or I don't like the color of their skin, or I don't like the fact that they're people, right? This whole like, what are you talking about, you people kind of thing, right? This whole idea of like, they're people is a people that I can't believe they live like that, or they wear that, or they're dirty, or they stink, or all this. It's like, it blows my mind when I hear things like that, because and it still exists. It exists to this day, and there's still so many people that buy into that stuff. This whole idea of like leaning on these stereotypes just because certain people might have certain things in common, right? Like certain things kind of come back around, or they lean into certain things because culturally, or how they brought up, or how they were brought up, or a particular neighborhood, or a financial situation or culture that they were brought up into. They kind of fall into these, whatever you want to call them, tropes or stereotypes. Doesn't mean that everybody is like that who looks like that person. So I didn't really want to make this a stereotyping kind of episode, but it did kind of turn into that a little bit, because again, talking about the fine lines, like at what point do we derail, or at what point do we fall off that tightrope and go from trying to be okay and trying to see things through the eyes of other people, and then derail into this side shoot of, and this side alley of these negative thoughts, and this idea that like, well, I'm better than you because I had these advantages, and I was able to stay away from the mistakes that you made, and X, Y, and Z, whatever excuse. To me, they're just all excuses. They're not valid in my mind. You really have to look at everybody else on an individual basis. Try to put yourself in other people's shoes. Try to humble yourself and try to put yourself on this level that you are no better than anybody else. And that doesn't, like, to me, and don't take it to the extreme in the other direction either. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying like, don't achieve in life. Don't go out trying to better yourself or to get to a certain station in life. And again, this is the tightrope. This is what I'm talking about. This is the fine line that I'm talking about. It's not about just an extreme either. It's not about the other end of the spectrum there either, where you're just like, well, I'm never going to do anything because I'm never going to be better than anybody else. So why even try? Right? This idea like, Dave or Jesus or anybody else has taught me this where, I'm not better than anybody else. So I should live like a poor person because there's no point in trying to achieve because we're all the same. Now, I'm not saying that. You should want to go out and achieve, to do the things that you want out of life, but it also means, I think, along the way that you shouldn't forget where you came from, but also where other people came from, and try to put yourself on the level of other people. Don't make those snap decisions. Don't react emotionally, especially if you're in a heat of the moment kind of thing, or you're getting into an argument. You see that all the time too, where, like the stereotypes come out when arguments happen and they go down, and two people from different cultures or whatever, or races or religion, start to argue about something. It's like, it may start okay and platonic and on a certain level, and then, like just out of the left field, it seems like all of a sudden it takes a hard turn and somebody's slinging a blanket accusation based off of, that person's skin color or their culture or whatever. It's like, where is that coming from? And again, I think that's a snap reaction. That is a reaction to an emotion because you're leaning in towards anger and those negative emotions, and that's not what it's about. Try not to do that. Take a step back, take a breath. Don't give in to those negative emotions. Don't give in to that anger. That's really what it is. It all stems from an anger. It's not from peace and harmony and togetherness and unity. It's from a negative place. It's from a dark place. It's from an anger kind of place. As soon as you start to think that you are above somebody else, you are going down the wrong path. I think I'll end it there. I think I can cap that one there. Sorry for my stream of consciousness there. That's another Dream Theater reference for you there. Another song to check out on that same album. Greatest instrumental of all time, in my opinion, as well. But yeah, that'll wrap up this one. Again, let me know in your comments on Spotify and YouTube. What are your thoughts on these fine lines? What are your thoughts on, other people arguing and making snap decisions and trying to think that they're better than other people? Do you have personal anecdotes? Have you struggled with this idea before? Have you seen other people who may not necessarily always be that positive influence in your life and tend to lean on those stereotypes, if only for one or a couple of different races? Let me know your personal thoughts on that. If you don't want me to share, again, as a reminder, if you don't want me to share your comment, please write that in your comment. Otherwise, I'm going to treat it as fair game and try to do like Q&A episodes where I'll bring up these comments and run through them. Or if you want me to share your comment but you don't want me to use your username or handle, let me know about that as well. Thanks so much for listening this week. We got to get back to the 10 Commandments, so I think I'm on the third one next because we've taken a few episode break on this one, so I got to dive back into it for that next episode. It's going to be the third commandment, so that's your teaser and that's your heads up for the next episode. And yeah, thanks. That'll do it. See you on the next one.